Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
If we have discussed it and said it once, then we have discussed it and said it 1,000 times and probably will another 1,000. By all accounts, education is one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable resource we have to develop, deploy, and apply to our communities and to our businesses. Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy for almost 25 years now. And this time, not only will we engage a couple of passionate advocates around the topic, namely Walter McDowell from Best NC and Bernadette Hampton of South Carolina Education Association, but later on we host again UNC system boss Tom Ross.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Bernadette Hampton, President of the South Carolina Education Association, Walter McDowell, Chairman of Best NC, and special guest Thomas W. Ross, President of the University of North Carolina. And now, here's Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program. Happy what's left of summer anyway, Walter. Good to have you here, Bernadette.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Walter, let's start with something. Best NC, you're a recovering banker, so you know a little bit about commerce and business and how it works. And now Best NC, and you are in the thick of the dialogue about education, and you can't talk about education without talking about the work skills gap. We've heard, in some cases, ad nauseum from businesses that unemployment is certainly important, but really the issue is work skills and finding the right talent for the jobs that are out there. Have we reached a tipping point around this?
Chris, we have a skills gap challenge in North Carolina. The North Carolina Department of Commerce surveyed North Carolina businesses of all sizes, and 40% of them reported absolutely critical vacancies.
Are they critical in that they will, again, back to this tipping point issue, does it become punitive for business, for industry, for the development of communities if they don't find those people? Is that where we are?
Absolutely, and these critical vacancies, Chris, are at all levels. They're at the master's and PhD levels for SAS and Red Hat, but they're also at hourly wage levels. So this threatens the health and well-being of our companies and our communities.
Bernadette, South Carolina, this is not unique to North Carolina. South Carolina, as you well know, and I promise I'm not preaching to you, but I know that to be an issue in South Carolina as well. How punitive is it to, it doesn't seem to have derailed South Carolina's commercial success with what has gone in commerce and Boeing and all the great development. So how critical is it, and what's the answer to something like this?
Well, we have a new initiative in South Carolina where we're focusing on career technical careers, and that would accomplish the students that are in the middle. You have the top and then you have the bottom, but the students are in the middle. So we feel that looking at the career technical educations and giving those kids an opportunity to expand in those career areas as opposed to looking at just four-year institutions as a means for obtaining careers. That would allow us to develop economically across the state with more jobs that we have within South Carolina.
Do you feel like, though, it's being deployed or it's unfolding quickly enough?
Well, we need to sustain the career tech curriculum that we have in South Carolina, and to make sure that the kids have an opportunity to be exposed to all career opportunities as opposed to just four-year institutions.
Yeah. You know, and I come back to this issue, Walter, and I'm wondering kind of aloud here, but I'm also asking you this question. I think of the Carolinas have held themselves out to be so progressive for so long. It's the New South. We've done so many great things. The education system, certainly just the growth through in-migration. So how have North and South Carolina ended up almost dead last, in some cases dead last, when it comes to teacher retention or paying teachers? How did we find ourselves in that position, and how do we dig ourselves out of that hole?
Well, I think we have an opportunity. We have the cooperation at all levels of education is strengthening, and we now understand that early learning, K-12, community college, and the UNC system are all part of the answer. So there is great work going on, heightened levels of collaboration. Mm-hmm. And as to the teacher salary issue, we've been through a dreadful recession. Mm-hmm. And I think that during the recession, we in North Carolina fell behind in properly compensating educators at all levels.
So you think paying the teachers a commensurate pay with the growth and development of not just the rest of the country, but in general, kind of got away from us more than it was an intent to do something malevolent?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, we are a victim of circumstance. That over the last 12 or 13 years, K-12 teachers' salaries in North Carolina have grown at a slower rate than teachers' salaries in most other states in the country. We are beginning to make an effort to catch up on that. Mm-hmm. The General Assembly unveiled a plan a year ago to move starting salaries from $30,000 to $35,000, which would make us competitive with neighboring states.
So,
go ahead. In South Carolina, we're also we're advocating for starting salaries to be $40,000, a minimum of $40,000, because it would make it more comparable to other careers that have bachelor's degrees when they graduate from four-year institutions and go on to the workforce, and it would make it less competitive statewide for teachers choosing which districts that they want to work for if we have a minimum starting salary of $40,000.
Do you feel like there? Go ahead. Were you
Chris, one thing that BEST has played a key role in is to bring all the stakeholders to the table. So 1 year ago, we convened 325 stakeholders, educators, educational experts, university individuals, political leaders, and business leaders. And we joined hands and said, together, we're going to move to a better place. And one of the things we tackled is developing a thoughtful, comprehensive talent plan for education. I mean, if you think about choosing the education profession, and my daughter is a third grade school teacher, we need to make—
public or private?
A public school in Greenville, South Carolina.
Right.
We need to figure out how to make the teaching profession very attractive to young people. Enrollment in the UNC schools of education is down 27%. That's not all about salary. It's all about whether that profession is attractive to the best and brightest. So there is a very thoughtful plan in North Carolina called Elevating Educators that is a comprehensive approach to recruiting, training, development, paying all educational employees a living wage, having them work for a highly qualified principal, and then giving them the respect that they deserve.
We're also in South Carolina, we're also embracing that same initiative through this initiative we could transform South Carolina, where we have brought together stakeholders as well in the same capacity from the business areas. The
and it's literally called Transform SC.
Transform South Carolina, yes, sir.
Okay.
And we are looking at doing the same concept that he just spoke about.
Yeah.
Whereas looking at addressing making the profession more attractive. What do we do to encourage more teachers to go into the teaching profession. Also through SARA. SARA is the Center of Education, Recruitment, and Retention and Advancement in South Carolina, and they have put out statistics where we have a shortage of 4,000 teachers annually, and colleges and universities within South Carolina only graduate 2,000. So we're looking at how do we attract and retain teachers as well.
Yeah, it sounds like collaboration is probably at least the key to get some. We got to keep the conversation going.
Right.
We want to take the continuum from K through 12 also up to higher education, which we will. Next week on the program, we take a look at what travel and tourism did this past summer, and the numbers very encouraging. From North Carolina, we have Whit Tuttle. From South Carolina, we have Dwayne Parrish. They are on together talking about the Carolinas tourism season. And then in 2 weeks, North Carolina Department of Transportation Chairman Ned Curran will be here around not just transportation issues and infrastructure issues, but politics and how we move that ball forward as well. So, not surprisingly, the contemporary discussion around the best use effectiveness in the development of North Carolina's venerated public university system has been many times an emotional and an acute skirmish between opposing ideas. It's sometimes highly politicized. A historic recession recently, a major change in Tar Heel State politics the last couple of years, in some ways has exacerbated the situation. But where to now? Whatever annual monies are ultimately allocated to the UNC system aside, what is the vision for the schools from the system leadership? And what is the real value of a liberal arts education? Joining us again is UNC System President Tom Ross. Mr. President, I almost don't know where to start with those questions, but and I know you're probably thinking, I don't know where he's going to start. Tom, let me come back to something. In March of this year, in an op-ed, you were quoted as writing, "America is losing her way in regards to higher education." That is fairly broad, but a fairly indicative comment. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think the data supports a statement like that, and I truly believe that we're not thinking about our future as a nation. If you look at the data, we spend 2% more today in real dollars than we did 25 years ago as a nation on higher education, 2%. During that same period of time, that same 25 years, enrollment has grown by 60%. We're spending 30% less per student today than we did 25 years ago as a nation. At the same time, our competition around the world is investing more and more in education, more and more in higher education. Our rankings in the world are falling. We no longer have the envy of the world in our higher education system. I think we are losing our way. I think we need to refocus as a nation. And it's not about educators wanting more money or wanting more salaries or anything like that. This is about competition. Our job is to produce talent. That's what we do. We produce talent for the workforce, for businesses. If we're not producing that talent, our businesses can't thrive. They can't be competitive, and we'll lose ground with the rest of the world. So this is really an important national issue that I think we need to talk about. We're seeing it in the presidential campaign, where both parties are talking about higher education, how do we fund it, what's happening with debt, all those issues that we read about. But the bottom line is this is an important competitiveness issue that we've got to pay attention to.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you say it's about competitiveness, and I believe it. I think certainly the evidence is out there for it. But it seems to me that this is a cultural issue. How do you change the DNA of a culture, of a country's culture like America that has not had the same value set around higher education in general, as other countries that, to your point, have now gone past the U.S. in education prowess?
Yeah, well, I think actually we have had a pretty a strong commitment and high value placed on higher education historically. I think what's happened over the last 10 or 20 years around the country is that we are beginning to lose our way. We're losing our focus on why it's so important. And if you look at workforce data, what you will see is the jobs of tomorrow are going to require higher educational attainment. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. As Walter said on the first part of the show, there's a skill gap, and it's not just in lower wage jobs. It's all the way up through the PhD, because we are not training enough people. We're not educating enough people at the level that are needed for the workforce of tomorrow. And that's only going to get worse. So part of our strategic plan at the university is to increase educational attainment. That's a goal that many states have now around the country. And if you look at educational attainment, what you also see is that it correlates with all sorts of other aspects of our life, with our health, with our civic engagement, all sorts of things. So the more educated we are, the better society we're going to have. But more importantly, the more talent we'll produce, the more competitive we'll be.
Walter?
Chris, let me ask President Ross a question, because I believe this is a great example of the power of collaboration. The Board of Governors did some absolutely remarkable work in evaluating the schools of education in North Carolina and deciding how those schools could move to a better place. And the Board of Governors made some very bold recommendations. And then we partnered with the Board of Governors and went to the General Assembly with an Elevating Educators plan. So, Tom, would you comment on that work?
Sure. I think what we've tried to do is recognize, first of all, as you all were discussing before I came on, that we've seen enrollment in our schools of education decline. We've seen a lot of discussion around teacher pay, around the quality of teaching, around what the future of education is at the K-12 level. And we know we play a major role in that because we produce a lot of the teachers. And some things have happened that have led to that decline in enrollment. But what we need to do is not only figure out how to attract the best and the brightest into education, but we need to do our best job of preparing teachers for the classroom in the best way possible. So what we've done is a longitudinal data study that looks at teachers as they enter the teaching profession, follows them during the course of their teaching, evaluates them based on the value they add to student achievement each year. We're able to determine from the portal of entry, whether somebody comes from one of our schools, whether they come from a private university or college, whether they're a lateral transfer, a Teach for America, whatever their entry point is, we can tell you how successful they are, how long they're going to stay based on our data. And then we can tie that success to particular levels, whether it's elementary or junior high, math or science, whatever. And we can then go back to our schools of education because we know how you're doing. We know what kind of teachers you're producing and how they're performing. So we can go back and say, you need to readjust your curriculum in middle school math. You're not getting it done. The teachers that you're producing are not getting it done. And we've got to do that. We've got to focus on preparing our teachers in the best way possible. It's critical that we've learned that teachers have support. You can't just take them out of the classroom and take them out of the university classroom and drop them in a K-12 classroom and expect them to be successful. They're like any other profession. They need mentoring, they need support, they need professional development. So we've designed a 3-year new teacher support program that assigns a mentor and a coach to a teacher that helps them during that first 3-year period. The legislature has funded that, but we've also partnered with local school systems to generate resources to support it. And I think it's making a real difference in retention. Because if teachers feel supported and feel valued and feel that their profession has real meaning, then I think we'll see retention increase and we'll see more people attracted to the profession. Salaries are very important and they're too low by far in North Carolina, just as our faculty are struggling with salaries. But it's about valuing education as a society and valuing teaching, whether that teaching is taking place pre-K or whether it's taking place in the university.
Bernadette, I know you want to get in here. Question?
I appreciate your comments and your philosophy about the need to have teachers to be valued and to be appreciated. And we also would like to be a part of the conversation when it comes to policy and regulation when it impacts education, because we are in the trenches and we are going to be the ones that's going to have to carry out those policies and regulations. But to leave us out of the conversation, then that would be more devaluing of the profession in order to attract and retain teachers. So I do appreciate your comments.
You have a question in here?
The question is, in looking at higher ed, what is higher ed role in reference to recruiting, making it more attractive, making the profession more attractive to get more students to go into education?
Yeah, you know, I think it's there are a lot of different techniques. We used to have one in North Carolina that worked really well, which was a scholarship program that provided scholarships for students that wanted to go into education. They would make a commitment on the other end of that they would stay in teaching for at least 4 years. And many of those teachers have become career teachers and have done quite well in our system. So something like that, some sort of incentive-based program, and I think the legislature is looking again at how to do that. What is the best strategy to attract the best and the brightest into our classroom? And I think, you know, it's not just the university, it's the whole society that has to think about how is it we can elevate the value that we place on teaching. Some of it's compensation, some of it's the way we talk about teachers, some of it's the way we treat them when we go talk to them as parents. There are all sorts of different ways that we can show value for teachers. You know, it's always interesting to me that we are quick to allow, and we should, people from the military to board on an airline first, or to, you know, to receive an ovation when, you know, we ought to be doing that for teachers because they're heroes in this country too, in my view. They're our future. They're preparing our own children for their future. And so we've got to figure out ways at the university to partner with the state, to partner with groups like Best NC and like your group to be sure that we're doing everything we can to help students understand if they come into teaching, it's going to be a great profession for them. They're going to be rewarded not just with compensation, fairly, they should be, but with the feeling that they're accomplishing something that's really important for society.
Tom, believe it or not, we got a couple minutes left, and I want to get to this issue of financing higher education. This is not going to be news to you or many people watching the program, but it's worth talking about what some folks have called the next bubble, the next financial bubble in this country is student debt. But more than that, it is someone once called it trying to get into an elite club now, getting into and financing a higher education. Even Carolina, even the system, is one of the best values in the country. It still becomes a five-figure cost for families on a yearly basis. How do we get our arms around this and make this an affordable way for folks to get that education? Yeah,
it's a tough one right now because of the disinvestment that's happening nationally. States are investing less, and you know, the federal government is restrained in what it can do for financial aid. And the demographics in this country are shifting in a way that with the wealth gap and all of that, there are going to be more and more people coming that need more and more financial aid if they're going to be able to get an education. All that's happening at a time which, as I said earlier, we need to be producing more people with a higher educational attainment. So I think we've got to think again as a nation and as a state, what do we value and why is it important? We need to understand the competitiveness argument and the need to produce more graduates. And then we need to think about, you know, what's happened just in our state, North Carolina, going back to 2008. At that point, the state paid 72% of the cost of educating a student. And the students, either by themselves or with their families, paid the other 18%. And just the year since 2008 to 2013, a 5-year period, and that's the last data we have, that has gone to 62% of the state share and the corresponding 38% being paid by, so it was 72 and 28%, now it's 62 and 38%. So there's a shift of 10% of the cost to the student. And that does raise the amount of debt that students have. Now, in North Carolina, we're very blessed because our legislature historically and even today keeps us at one of the highest level of funding per student of most states. We're in the top 5 usually. So we have constitutionally required low tuition. And our tuition is still very low compared to the rest of the country. And our schools are always rated as some of the least expensive. But then when you add some of the other costs, that's when those costs go up. But I remind you of something people always forget. Some of that cost is housing and food. And if a student is not in school, they still got housing and food costs. So we have to sort of back some of that out. Some of it's insurance for health and that sort of thing. So,
and we're literally going to run out of time, and I want to make sure I get this in. By the way, congratulations on a nice honor by the Echo Foundation, along with former Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke in September of this year. We're proud to have you as Assistant President. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Bernadette, welcome. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
Thanks at Best NC. Heck of a job, Walter. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very
See
much.
you next week.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.